Margie Foley was assisting in a missing person search. For Margie, it was like searching for a daughter, since the missing girl was her daughter's best friend. The search for Ebby Steppach was on. But something wasn't right, because the search was conducted only by locals. There was no police officer in sight. The search was focused on the area where Ebby's car was found, Shalamont Park, an expansive and remote park surrounded by construction sites and wooded areas. Margie and Kaylee passed by a rainwater drain, just feet from where Ebby's car was found, and something stopped them dead in their tracks. The smell. It was horrible. Other people passing by this seemingly simple manhole also smelled the same thing. So they did what they thought was best at the time. They called the police. Surely they'd take care of things from here, right? But when the police arrived, they took one look at the drain, rolled their eyes, and coldly dismissed the people who were searching for Ebby. The police had already searched this area with sniffer dogs, and now people had called them here, wasting their time, all for nothing. So that was that. The drain wasn't looked into, and nothing came of it. That was until 3 years later, when a retired detective would stand in the same spot and order the area to be excavated. And when that happened, nothing was ever the same again. Welcome to True Crime Stories. If this is your first time here, I'm your host, Ty Knotts. I post new true crime documentaries every single week, so be sure to hit subscribe to stay up to date with all my latest cases. It's completely free. Ebby Jane Steppach was born on March 31st, 1997, in Little Rock, Arkansas. Her parents, Lori and Peter, also had two more children, a boy named Trevor and a girl named Harris. At the time of the case, Ebby was attending Little Rock Central High School. Now, Little Rock is not known for being a safe area whatsoever, but this was the place that Ebby called home. As years passed by, Ebby's parents ended up getting divorced, and Lori married a man named Michael. But this change didn't alter Ebby's life trajectory too much, and she quickly grew close to her new stepdad and welcomed him into the family. They had a really good relationship, and Ebby was transitioning just fine into her new life. Ebby was known for having a fiery personality. Nothing would ever get in the way of her doing whatever she wanted to do, and one thing she wanted to do was become a cosmetologist. She was well on her way to doing this, but by 2015, she'd hit a bit of a roadblock. By now, Ebby was 18, and as any newly turned adult, she wanted independence, so she moved out of her parents' home and went to live with her grandparents, but would occasionally stay with friends for extended periods of time. It seems pretty clear that for one reason or another, while her home life was supposedly great, something was brewing and Ebby wanted out. This leads us to the aforementioned roadblock that popped up in her life. Ebby, desperate to get out of her parents' home, soon fell into the habit of partying and staying out late into the night. She even started skipping school at one point. Ebby was going through a rebellious phase in her life, and even though her family was not happy about this sudden change, they still wanted Ebby to find her way back. But unfortunately, Ebby would never get that chance. On October 21st, 2015, Ebby skipped school, and 2 days later she attended a party sometime in the evening, but she didn't tell her family where she was going. This party led to something terrible and tragic happening to Ebby. The next day when Ebby came back home, she was not herself. She was very shaky and frightened, and when her stepfather asked Ebby what had happened, she couldn't keep it in anymore. Ebby tearfully told Michael that she was taken advantage of at the party, and to make matters worse, Ebby claimed that there were 4 men involved in this horrific act, and these evil young men had filmed the whole thing. Just hearing about this makes me so far beyond furious. I can't even imagine the emotions that Michael must have felt after hearing this news coming from his daughter. The first step, according to Michael, was to inform the police, and he was right. Ebby listened to him, but first, she wanted to sleep on it for a bit, so that's what she did. Ebby later claimed that she had threatened 2 of the wrongdoers that she would report the assault to the police. Now, this sounds like a bit of an or else statement, but it's not clear what exactly Ebby wanted from them. The most obvious assumption was that Ebby wanted them to delete any evidence that the assault ever took place, particularly the video footage, but this is just a guess. Whatever the case may be, Ebby went to her grandparents' house after this conversation with Michael, and the threats against her assailants, where she just tried to relax, build up her strength and courage, and just get her head together. She spent the whole day with her grandparents, and in the evening at about 7:50 p.m., she texted Michael that she was ready to report the attack to the police, and she wanted him to go with her, to which Michael obviously agreed. She waved goodbye to her grandparents, who were unaware of what Ebby was fighting on the inside, and she drove away towards her mom's home. But Ebby never arrived there. That was sadly the last time that Ebby was even seen, and Michael and Lori got extremely worried very quickly. After not hearing from Ebby for several hours, Michael and Lori were naturally terrified. This wasn't like Ebby, and considering the events that had just unfolded in her life, they were beside themselves, scared and confused about what to do next. Obviously, Ebby was shaken up by the incident, but nothing suggested that she would do something reckless like running away or worse. So Lori and Michael tried calling Ebby multiple times, but she didn't pick up. Everyone was worried sick for Ebby. She didn't come back home or to her grandparents' house or even to the police station. So where was she? Well, the next day, on October 24th, Ebby's brother Trevor got a call, and it was from Ebby. Trevor remembered Ebby sounding very out of it, like she was disoriented, and when he asked where she was, Ebby answered that she was outside of his house. But when Trevor went outside, he didn't see anyone. Trevor said that Ebby also sounded panicked and that she didn't seem like she fully knew where she was. The only thing Trevor could make out from this conversation was the fact that Ebby told him she was in her car before hanging up. When Trevor called Ebby back again, she wouldn't answer her phone. And this time, it would stay that way. No one heard from her again after this. This was when Ebby's family started to truly freak out. Her radio silence, the strange phone call, and how Ebby sounded in that phone call with her brother, something was seriously wrong. This was when Ebby's parents went to the police, but not to report what had happened to Ebby at that party, no. Now, they were forced to report Ebby missing. The police, hearing that Ebby was 18 and rebellious, immediately listed her as a runaway. The police, seemingly completely unbothered by the fact that an 18-year-old girl had just gone missing, instructed the parents to wait an additional 12 hours before they would officially begin an investigation. Well, when Ebby's parents realized that the police weren't going to do anything, they made flyers for Ebby and went door to door asking anyone and everyone for help. It wasn't until 3 days later that something was discovered. On October 27th, an abandoned Volkswagen Passat was discovered by a security guard of Shalimont Park. The park is located in West Little Rock, and the area is somewhat remote. It was a wooded area surrounded by lots of construction. The car was found near this wooded area, and tragically, it was soon confirmed to be Ebby's car. The security guard called the police and notified them about the abandoned car, which had been sitting here for 2 or 3 days. But no officer came, even after the security guard waited by the car for 2 hours. This man then called the police once again, and after another hour, the police finally arrived at the park and took a report of the car. When the police looked further, they found out that the car had a dead battery and the gas tank was empty. The key was still in the ignition, indicating that it was left running for a long time until it eventually ran out of gas. But the inside of the car was a mess. Ebby's belongings, including her phone, keys, contact lenses, wallet, etc., were found in the car, and makeup was scattered all over the seats. Now, if you remember, Ebby loved makeup, and she took care of her things like they were her most prized possessions. Ebby's mom even confirmed she would never leave her things unattended and thrown around like this, especially her very expensive makeup. So seeing it all scattered, broken, and trashed in the car without a care in the world was highly suspicious. But the problem was, even though her car was now found, Ebby was still nowhere to be seen. Still, the police were adamant that Ebby had simply run away. But how could she have run away without her car? And why would she have left that car running? The police didn't even interview any passersby or bother to check the surveillance footage of the area. Anything that could have led to some answers, the police just brushed it off. This was getting really weird. Why were the detectives so uninterested? I'm sure you can imagine that Ebby's family and loved ones were frustrated beyond belief. The investigators were supposed to help them, but it seemed like finding Ebby was the least of their concerns. To add to this frustration, the detectives even left the car doors and trunk open after their investigation. They literally just left the car unlocked and wide open and just drove away. Not long after, a heavy rainstorm caused the car to get filled with water, and in turn it ruined any possible evidence or clues. The police's lack of interest in investigating Ebby's disappearance left people feeling unsettled and weirded out. Why weren't the police doing something about it? Well, the community had to worry about that later, because they were now busy trying to piece things together by themselves. If the police weren't going to do something, someone had to. Ebby's parents were certain that whatever happened to Ebby took place near where her car was found abandoned. Now, what's really interesting is that the police had now begun to claim that they'd already used cadaver dogs to search the area around her car for any clues. Now, I'm not calling them out for lying or anything like that, but I do want to say that I just find it super hard to believe, because up to this point, the police could not have been less interested in investigating this case. So why, with this in mind, would they have gone through the effort and expense of searching with sniffer dogs if they were so uninterested and supposedly believed that Ebby was just a runaway? It doesn't add up to me. Now, in their defense, I was able to dig up a couple photos of this search taking place, but we don't know how extensive it was or where the investigators even searched. This is why the locals, family, and friends opted to take matters into their own hands and search for themselves. Now, the night when Ebby was supposed to drive from her grandparents to her mom's house, it was found out that she had texted someone, or some people rather. Ebby, after deciding to report the assault, texted two of the alleged wrongdoers and threatened them that she was going to the police. Michael suspected that Ebby reached out to these men for the video of that unfortunate incident. Maybe she was gathering evidence so that the police would believe her. As mentioned before, we really just don't know. What was even more alarming was that sometime after these texts were sent to the two men in question, Ebby also made two one-minute phone calls to 911. We don't know what she said in those calls because, get this, the Little Rock PD has no record of Ebby ever calling them. This is yet another strange layer to this case. We know for a fact that these calls took place, so where did the written records or the recordings go? Things were starting to get really suspicious. People naturally suspected the four mysterious men who had assaulted Ebby at the party to be the ones behind Ebby's disappearance. It was possible that the men felt threatened when Ebby said that she would report them to the police, and maybe this was why Ebby was nowhere to be found. But how could these young men have found her after leaving her grandparents' house? Was it possible that Ebby set up a meeting with one or more of these guys at the park that day? Now, while the police were busy investigating Ebby's disappearance in their own way, whatever that truly entailed, Ebby's friends, family, and members of the community were doing their own searches in the wooded area and in the park where Ebby's car was found abandoned. It had been close to a month since Ebby disappeared, and people searched the area just feet away from the location where Ebby's car was found. A woman named Margie Foley, who was Ebby's best friend's mom, reached out to the police, notifying them of a very bad smell coming from the drain near where Ebby's car was. This odor was reported by several other people in the search, too. The smell was so bad that people couldn't even stand near the drain for longer than a few seconds. But did the police do something about it? Of course not. The police dismissed and basically brushed everyone's concerns off and told them it was probably a dead animal or something in the drain.
She said she smelled something decomposing, and she was worried that that may be related to the case somehow.
Even in the phone call, you can tell the police sounded bored, uninterested, and unbothered by this information. Now, why the locals didn't attempt to take a look into the drain, I'm not sure. It's possible it was just too dangerous for one reason or another. I mean, after all, it is a manhole. There's no telling what you may find down there. But this smell and the lack of effort from the police left everyone feeling unsettled. The community, passers-by, and even residents nearby reported that the smell was unbearable. The odor was really bad, but not to the police, it seemed, because to them, drains always smelled like that. This was supposedly one of the police officers' actual statements. Drains always smell like that. But anyway, getting back to the investigation, according to the police, they'd questioned the four men who had allegedly assaulted Ebby, after several people came forward with their concerns. When they found out that Ebby had contacted the perpetrators on the night before she disappeared, the community pressured the police into questioning them and looking further into them. Well, the police did question them, but they only questioned them on a surface level and didn't even conduct cell phone searches. From what I can gather, they basically just asked the men, "Did you do it?" The men said no, and that was that. But if you remember, Ebby's incident was recorded, so surely it must have been somewhere on one of the men's phones or somewhere in their possession. But the police never bothered to look for the recording. They didn't even make a 1-second attempt at tracking it down. They literally did nothing. The so-called detectives were not even trying to solve Ebby's case at this point. They were incompetent and unbothered from the start, which is just infuriating. It's so hard to imagine being in Ebby's parents' shoes. They wanted answers. They were trying to find them on their own, and law enforcement was doing nothing, even though it's literally their job to solve crimes and to help make Little Rock a safe place for its residents. But having been a previous resident of a neighboring town in that area, that's pretty much Little Rock in a nutshell. The crime there is unreal. Unbelievably, 2 years went by, and there were still no answers for where Ebby had gone. The case had essentially gone cold, and there were no leads, no progress, nothing. The Steppach family eventually announced a $50,000 reward for any clues or credible information on Ebby and her disappearance, but it led them nowhere. Ebby's family even made an appearance on the Dr. Phil show in December of 2017 in hopes of getting Ebby's disappearance and the progress of the case out there. Ebby's parents were heartbroken and put off by the police's efforts to solve Ebby's case. Ebby wasn't the type of girl to just run away. I mean, sure, she wasn't in the best place at the time of the case, but she had plans for the future, and she was trying to get back on her feet. It's just so heartbreaking to see Ebby's parents go through all this turmoil while reeling from their daughter's disappearance and all those unanswered questions looming over their heads like some sort of terrifying monster. Seeing all of this, Ebby's family hired a private investigator, TJ Ward. Now, if you're in the true crime niche, then you might know this name. TJ Ward was the private investigator in Natalee Holloway's case too, which is just as mysterious and eerie. He'd worked on Natalee's case for more than 12 years and has over 4 decades of experience under his belt. Ebby's family was relieved that her case was in good and capable hands. TJ Ward was the first person to actually interview the security guard at Shalamont Park, the same man who discovered Ebby's car abandoned near that wooded area. The police didn't even question this guy in the first place as a witness. That's how unbothered the Little Rock PD really was. The security guard, whose name was Guy, told TJ that he had seen Ebby at the park before and that he'd seen her with a man about 3 different times. The man and Ebby seemed close, and they would occasionally hug and kiss each other too. The man was found out to be Ebby's boyfriend, Eric. When the investigator reached out to Eric, he corroborated meeting Ebby in that park multiple times. He also claimed that Ebby came to see him the night that she disappeared. So this proved that she wasn't, in fact, meeting one of her attackers there. It was quite the opposite. Eric remembered that Ebby seemed upset and just lost. She wasn't shaky or impaired or anything, but she didn't look like her normal self either. According to Eric, Ebby looked concerned, like she knew something bad was going to happen. It's unclear if Eric knew about Ebby getting attacked the night before or not, but either way, Eric was ruled out as a suspect because he, like Ebby's friends and family, was genuinely worried about her, and he had an airtight alibi. Even though TJ was a seasoned investigator, Ebby's case eventually led to another dead end, 3 years after her disappearance. Everyone strongly suspected the 4 men involved in Ebby's alleged assault, but their identities were never made public. But in 2018, almost 3 years after the disappearance of Ebby, the case was picked up by another detective, Tommy Hudson. Tommy was actually a retired police officer, and like everyone else except the Little Rock PD, he thought Ebby's case was very bizarre. He went back to the place where Ebby's car was found abandoned. On May 24th, 2018, Tommy made his way to Shalamont Park and he went to the nearby sewer. The drainage system had a manhole cover on the ground, and once the lid was lifted, you could see a ladder going down to a narrow pipe at the end. The pipe was barely a foot or so wide, and it was about 80 feet deep. Now, Ebby was very petite, but it wouldn't have been very hard to crawl into that narrow pipe. Regardless, Tommy had his sights set on this drainage system, and it didn't look like something he could just brush off. So he called in his team, and the 80-foot-long pipe was poked and prodded. And 70 feet in, the prods hit something. It was an obstruction. Tommy instructed the pipe to be excavated to get a closer look. The pipe was dug up soon after, and when the detective looked in from the back end of the pipe, skeletal remains were found in this narrow drainage pipe. Everyone's worst fears were close to coming true. But before anyone could say anything for sure, the remains had to be tested. The police took the remains in, and they were positively identified as 18-year-old Ebby Steppach. Her family was shattered by this news. 3 years into Ebby's disappearance, the constant and cold dismissal of the police led to this tragic climax. What's even more mind-boggling is the fact that people reported the weird and putrid smells coming from that same drain 3 years back, almost a month after Ebby's disappearance. But the police did nothing. Ebby was right there the whole time. But if you thought that this was angering enough, wait till you hear what the Little Rock PD had to say about this discovery. Now, because Ebby's body was found 3 years later and in a very bad state, it was hard to determine the cause of death. Now, it's possible that this is the case and her cause of death just couldn't be determined, or the police are keeping this information under lock and key, or they haven't even bothered to check. We don't even know. But as of official news, Ebby passed away, and what happened to her remains unknown because of the state of decomposition. But there have been a few theories about how exactly Ebby got into this pipe in the first place, but we'll get to that in just a minute. But because Ebby never had a chance to go to the police to report the assault, there was really no evidence collected regarding who could have done this to her, aside from the information that she'd revealed to her stepdad, Michael. Regardless, Ebby had now been found, but not in the way anyone was hoping. Soon after her body was recovered from that pipe, Ebby was finally laid to rest. A lot of people, myself included, believe that Ebby's alleged assailants were behind her passing. When they found out that Ebby was going to report them, they lured her under the pretense of giving her that video, and that was when they ended her life and disposed of her body in the drain. After which, the heavy rain and influx of water pushed Ebby deeper into the drain over the years that she was stuck there. This is the prevailing theory that many people have subscribed to. In my book, it's the only one that makes complete and total sense. We have motive, means, and opportunity. After Eric left the park that day, Ebby would have been completely alone, as there's been no indication that the security guard was on watch that evening. It was the perfect opportunity for a crime to unfold. The fact that the mysterious and alleged perpetrators are still at large makes people believe that they belong to families of influential people, either the police or politicians. And that could explain why the police were not interested in solving Ebby's case, and how they royally screwed everything up. Everything just makes sense. A police officer's son gets involved in something nefarious, and his dad and his dad's friends cover the whole thing up. It's classic, it's simple, and it's probably the truth. As for the police, they have a wild theory of their own. They think that Ebby crawled into the drain pipe herself and took her own life following the alleged assault. This theory is bonkers from the get-go. First of all, the lid of the manhole cover is very heavy. Someone with Ebby's weight and build couldn't have been able to lift that lid, go inside the manhole, close the lid, and then belly crawl into the foot-wide pipe. She was just far, far too small. The girl was 5'2" and barely 110 pounds soaking wet. It just wouldn't have been possible, considering your average manhole cover already weighs over 100 pounds. Secondly, Ebby didn't seem like she was planning on ending at all. There are almost always signs when a person is going through some sort of dark phase. Ebby even had plans to meet up with her friend for ice cream later that night after reporting the incident to the police. And it's just unbelievable to even think that Ebby would do such a thing to herself. At the end of the day, police have shown zero interest in tracking down the person responsible for ending Ebby's life. But I think each and every one of us knows good and well who did this. And it's just a matter of getting the right people on board to make these people pay. Ebby's family deserves answers. This has gone on long enough. But tragically, for the Steppach family, their trauma was not quite over. Because just a short while after they lost Ebby, they lost her brother Trevor, who suffered a random heart attack with no warning at all. Ebby's parents lost 2 children in the worst ways possible. As it stands for the Steppach family, there is no justice. There is no silver lining. There is no moment of reprieve. There's just pain and hurt. Unimaginable hurt. The only possible bright side of all this is that a cold case unit was developed by the Arkansas Attorney General's office at the beginning of 2024. There's been no word about any progress in Ebby's case since this task force was formed, but they have confirmed that they are working on her case. I just hope that with enough time, enough hope, and enough prayers that Ebby's family will get the closure they need. And may the person or people responsible for this young girl's torment one day face the full, undiluted wrath of God. Thank you guys for tuning in to another episode of True Crime Stories. I wanted to give a special thank you to a couple channel members, including Dana Hoffman and Bo Watts. If you also want to become a member of the channel, you'll gain access to new videos days or weeks before they're uploaded to the public, and it is a great way to support the channel and help out. And I appreciate each and every one of you guys that have decided to do that. If you want to join, you can click that big join button below the video, or find the link down in the description. And don't forget, True Crime Stories t-shirts are also now available. You can grab one of those from a link down in the description as well. But as always, if you enjoyed this video, check out this other interesting case I covered. And don't forget to subscribe. It's totally free and just keeps you up to date with all my future videos. But my name is Ty Knotts, and I'll catch you guys in the next one.